Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Baking with Bryan Live. My name is Bryan and you are in my kitchen baking with me live. Today, if you're from Baltimore, hun, today we are going to be making something really special and should bring you back to the days of good old bakeries down in Baltimore. We are making Baltimore peach cake, which is a traditional thing here in Baltimore, mainly because you can get really good Eastern Shore peaches here. And so peach cake dates back to like the 1800s, German bakers. I believe that it's Jewish bakers used to be making challah and they had leftover challah dough, so they pressed it out into the pan, put some peaches on it, threw it in the oven and put an apricot glaze on it, and voila, the Baltimore peach cake was invented. But so it's German bakers kind of created this thing because they had fresh peaches in the summer, and it's just something really to highlight the fresh peaches. As I have here, these are just fresh peaches and they smell amazing. So this recipe, the dough is a yeast risen dough, so it's not like a birthday cake kind of dough. It's more like a brioche kind of dough. And so it's a yeast risen dough. It's a lot lighter. It's really good with the peaches. You bake it just enough so that the peaches start to release their juices. Just makes for a really nice cake. And then you glaze it with apricot glaze. Gives it a nice sweetness, a nice little shine to it. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that really easily. It's a really simple recipe to make. So I'm going to get started. Yeast. I know we've talked about yeast. We've done yeast a couple times. We did babka with yeast. Yeast is a leavening agent. It's actually a living organism. It's active dry yeast, which is what I have here. It's little granules, and the organisms are kind of enclosed in those little granules. And then you wake them up when you mix it with water and a little bit of sugar, and they start to foam. So yeast feeds off of sugar, which either natural sugar in the flour or sugar in the recipe, and the byproduct from the yeast digesting the sugar is carbon dioxide. So when that carbon dioxide gets trapped in the dough, it creates bubbles, and that's what gives you your leavening, because when you put the bubbles in the oven, the heat expands the bubbles and it leavens your cake or your bread or whatever, so long as your yeast is fresh. Yeast actually has an expiration date printed onto it. Make sure your yeast is fresh before you use it. I actually had to check mine because I was worried it was a little old, and I'll show you how you check it. So actually we can get started doing that. So we're going to take a little bit of warm water. The recipe calls for 110 grams of water, I believe. Yeah, 110 grams of warm water. So I'm just going to take about 50 of that. Not hot water. You just want it to be a little warm because hot water will kill the yeast. Yeast works best at body temperature, which hopefully is around 98.6. Got a little bit more than 50 grams there, but that's all right. And then we're going to take a pinch of the sugar, and we're going to dissolve that in the water, and that's going to be for our yeast to feed on. And this is going to wake up the yeast and get it active. It's called proofing the yeast, or if you're in England, it's called proving, because you're proving that the yeast can do the job. So we have 80 grams of water, and then we're going to add to that about 5 grams of yeast. And then we're going to stir this up and set it to the side. And you will see it's going to start to foam up. Come on. It's going to start to foam up as it wakes up and starts chowing down on that sugar in the water. This container is actually a little small. I'm going to get a bigger container. You want to use a container or a bowl with a little bit of room in it because the yeast will expand as it is proofing or proving itself. It's going to bubble up and expand, so you want something that has room for it to move into. Otherwise, it's going to make a big old mess on your countertop. And I've done that before. All right, so you got your kind of milky, yeasty water with the sugar in it, and we're just going to put that to the side, and we're going to watch it bubble up and foam up and prove itself. So that's delicious. Get all that in there. It should only take about 5 minutes for it to proof it up. If you're in the store looking for yeast, you don't want to use nutritional yeast because that is something completely different. If you want to make like a vegan mac and cheese, nutritional yeast is actually a really good addition to give it that cheesy flavor without using real cheese. So, to our mixing bowl, we're using two different kinds of flour here. We're using bread flour and all-purpose flour. Again, just so that the bread flour has a lot of higher gluten content in it to give the cake a little bit more structure. So we're going to add our bread flour to the bowl, and then we're going to add our sugar to the bowl. That sugar is going to feed the yeast. And then we're going to add our butter to that. And so this is kind of like a brioche dough, where it's an enriched dough. It's got eggs and butter in it. I believe we need 28 grams of butter. So I'm just going to quick measure about. That's 18. That's 30 is enough. So this is soft room temperature butter, and we're just going to add that into the flour and sugar and mix it together until it gets to a crumbly consistency. We just want to make sure that the butter gets dispersed throughout the flour. And then to this, we're going to add warm water. So we've already measured 80 grams of our 110 into this, into the yeast. So we only need however much more, 20 more grams of, again, warm water. So our yeast is getting a little foamy on top. And our flour and butter and sugar looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and add our water and our yeasty water. And make sure you get it all in there. Every little bit counts. We're going to mix that together. And this is going to it's going to look really soft, which is completely fine and normal. It's not going to look like a bread dough yet because there's not enough flour in it too. We're just kind of mixing it all together in stages. I have the all-purpose flour is here next, and that's split into two different parts because we're going to add it in two different stages. So that looks pretty good. Got all the flour's all wet. That's in there. So now we're going to add half of our all-purpose flour and the salt. And then our 1 egg and 1 egg yolk, which is also going to enrich the dough. Another little thing about yeast is you never want to put yeast on top of salt or sugar when you're measuring it. So like you never want to put your bowl down and measure your salt and your sugar and then your yeast on top of it, because that will kill the yeast. The salt and sugar is hydroscopic, which means it absorbs moisture, so it'll dry out and kill the yeast. So you never want to do that. You always want to mix your sugar and your salt into your flour first, and then add either your dry yeast or your yeast and water mixture into that, so it's not sitting on top of the salt or sugar. So we're going to mix that up. It's starting to look like dough, but it's still a little soft. We still have half of the all-purpose flour to add to that. And we're going to let that mix. And while that's mixing, we're going to get our pan ready. This is a 1/4 sheet size pan. And we're going to lightly butter it, because butter is what? Fundamental. So our dough looks pretty good. We do want it to mix a little bit just to produce a little bit of gluten, so that it's a little stretchy and has a little bit of body to it. Body, yaddy, yaddy. So that's good. Can they see the dough? Yeah, they can see the dough. You can see how it has formed a dough. It is a sticky dough, which is fine, but it has formed a dough. And we're just going to let that sit and rest while we get our pan ready. You could melt the butter and use a brush to spread it on, but we don't really do that in restaurant biz, we just use our hands and make a mess. So you want to get that butter all up in there. Obviously this is going to act as an anti-sticking non-stick surface, but it's also going to add a little bit of flavor, and it's going to also create a little bit of a crunchy crust on the bottom or outside of the cake. Let's take a minute and look at call out some names of who's watching. Aunt Joanne is watching, my sister Amy is watching, Marcy Kramer, Bev Potts. Oh, Ava Mack is watching. Oh, that's so fun. Hi, Ava. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, so we have our butter dish. We're going to add, my bowl scraper is, okay, nobody look. Go off of the overhead camera. I have to open the sink for a minute. You don't want to see it. It's a mess. Gotta get my scraper. Okay, we're back. Get my bowl scraper. Just scrape the dough out of the bowl. This cake, if you will, if you call it a cake or a bread or a dish, is really good for a party because you can actually serve it. You can just serve it in the pan because it's so beautiful and it's so delicious, and you just cut it and serve it from the pan. I do recommend serving it warm with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. That just takes it over the top. But however you would like it. You can eat it for breakfast, whatever you would like. So you just take your dough. We're going to put it down on the pan. And then, guess what comes next? Even more butter. We're going to butter our hands. Why are you going to butter your hands? I'm going to show you. Because we're going to press out this dough onto the pan, and the butter on our hands is going to prevent it from sticking. So even though it's a sticky dough, it's not going to stick to your hands because of butter. Everybody likes butter. Can I go any higher? So yeah, it's a really basic dough. Theoretically, you could put nectarines, you could put plums, you could do apricots, but in Baltimore you do peaches. But it's a fairly basic plain dough, so you know, do what you like. I wouldn't put like bananas or anything on it. Don't go and get crazy. But any stone fruit, which a peach is a stone fruit, so we can talk about that. Stone fruits are fruits that have a pit, a big stone pit in the center. Peaches, nectarines, plums, apricots, pluots. Those are all considered stone fruits. So you take your peach. Hopefully you get freestone peaches because clingstone peaches are a beast to work with. We need 13 pieces. 2, 4, 5, 7, 8. Yeah, plenty of pieces, I think, right? 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah. So you quarter the peaches. Where are we? So let's say this is the peach. I mean, I know you all know how to quarter a peach, but let me just show you. So this is the peach. What I do is I cut it in half around the pit and then twist it and open it up. And one side will have the pit. If it's a freestone, one side will have a pit, one side won't. So you take the side that doesn't have the pit and put it to the side, and then you pop the pit out, and then you just take it and you'll take your knife and you just cut it in half like that and quarter it. You want nice big quarter chunks. And we're putting these on before we proof it. The peaches are going to proof along with the cake in the oven or in your proof box if you're fancy enough. The cake is going to rise up around the peaches. And of course, we're one short. So you take one of your bigger pieces, cut it in half. Look at that. Perfect. Ta-da! There's your Baltimore peach cake. Well, the beginnings of it. So, at this point, you're going to put this into a warm, humid spot in your house. Whether that be in the stove, in the bathroom, with the shower running, doesn't matter. Warm, humid spot. You want it to be about 98 to 100 degrees. Remember that body temperature is what the yeast works best at. Anything above about 108 is going to kill the yeast, and it's not going to rise at all. a warm, humid spot for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. You're looking for it to double in size. It doesn't necessarily have to be a certain amount of time. You're looking more for the rise and for it to double in size. So what I do is I take my oven. The oven is off. I turn the light on in the oven. That keeps it a little bit warm. And then I also put a pan. I have my proof one in there to show you. But I put a sheet pan in the bottom, and I boil some water, and I pour the water in that sheet pan, and it creates this really warm, perfect temperature, humid condition for the cake to rise in, for the dough to rise in. I do that for all my bread, for my doughs, any yeast risen dough. So this one is just about ready to go in the oven and bake, and you can see the difference between the two. See how that's risen beautifully? Thank God the yeast was alive. So you can see it's pretty doubled. It's pretty much doubled in size, and it's risen up around the peaches and kind of encapsulated the peaches. So I'm going to put this one in the proof box because that's going to be for later. And then this one is ready to go. Before you bake it, we're going to take some cinnamon sugar, and we're just going to sprinkle. I do 1 cup of sugar to 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and you just lightly sprinkle it on. And then you preheat your oven to 350 degrees, and it bakes for about 22 minutes. That's just enough time to bake the cake, but keep it moist, and to let the peaches release their juices into the cake. So, once you've done that, we're going to pretend I put that in the oven, and through the magic of television, ta-da! Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle! This is our peach cake. So when it comes out of the oven, while it's still hot, you want to glaze it. So we use an apricot glaze. I use an apricot glaze. It's 1 cup of apricot preserves or jam to half a cup, or a quarter cup really, of hot water. And then you throw that in the microwave to melt the jam. And then you take it. It works best while it's still hot out of the oven. And then you just, don't be shy with it. You want it to kind of pull in with the peaches there. But this adds a beautiful shine to the cake, and then it also adds a layer of sweetness. Look at that. It's a beautiful thing. So now, you can either cut it in the pan, put it on your table and serve it. I'm going to try and pop it out. So wish me luck. Let me grab my tool that I don't have. Take my bench scraper and just kind of go in, make sure it's not stuck. I recommend serving this in the pan, just because why not? It's beautiful. Or you can order one from me and I will bake it for you and put it in a box and make it all nice and pretty. But we are going to, come on, take it out. Oh, it's nice and soft on the bottom. I'm so excited. Actually, I have a studio audience with me here today, so they're going to get to try it as well. And we're going to take a serrated knife. So you could cut it a couple different ways. You could cut it so 1 peach per person per serving. 1 peach per serving. I like to cut them a little bit bigger. So I cut it in half, and then I cut, so each person gets about 1.5 peaches. You want to use ripe peaches. If you can only get underripe peaches, to buy those, get them a couple days out, a couple days in advance, and throw them in a paper bag with a banana, and they will ripen within 2 days. Just ripe peaches, soft to the touch. You don't want to squeeze them too hard because you'll bruise them, but just a little. If they have a little bit of give, then they're perfect. But peaches are kind of hard to pick the ripest, the best ones. You can smell them. If you can smell the peach through your mask, you know it's a good one. If they have a peachy smell, a sweet peachy smell, then they're good. If you want to get a peach that's really, really good, my favorite peach is a donut peach or a UFO peach, and they look like little donuts. They're flat, round peaches, but they are super juicy and super flavorful. You could use them for a peach cake, but they're going to look a little funny because they're not a nice round shape. They're kind of donut shaped. But for like eating peaches, those are my favorite. Those are my favorite ones. So, without further ado, we're going to taste it because I know that's the best part that everybody waits for. So you can see you have a really nice ratio of cake to peach. The cake has risen really well. The peaches are cooked just a little bit, releasing their juices, and oh man, so good. It's sweet. The apricot glaze is nice and sweet. You get a little bit of spice from the cinnamon, but by no means is it overpowering at all. The cake is just sweet enough. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Good for brunch. Good for any time. That's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Make sure to check us, like us on Facebook, Bryan's Bakery. Go to my website, bryansbakery.net. Contact me for if you'd like to order a peach cake and you're in the Baltimore area. I'd be happy to bake one and deliver it to you. Other than that, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much, all 17 of you, for joining in. I really appreciate it. And with that, bon appetit. Enjoy, because I am.